there's a couple things in common that companies on the unconventional share. One is this notion of they want to own versus rent, as I just talked about. They want to create their own experiences, their own platforms, their own partnerships, rather than just sponsor ones that already exist or rent space for media companies. Another is a strong theme of giving back to core customers as opposed to pure narrow self-interest. There's a sense that if you create experiences that your customer cares about, the goodness will accrue back to you over time. You don't need to be too tight in that connection. And then the third thing is, I think there's a sense of long-term investments. There's a patience that these are not initiatives that are going to pay off in the next quarter necessarily. They're not about short-term promotion. So I'm very excited to have two great examples of this kind of unconventional thinking on the panel with me today. And as David said, we've got David Haroldsen from Intel and Shiv Singh from Pepsi. And I'll let you guys introduce yourselves in your initiatives. And David, do you want to start with Intel?
Sure. So I'm Dave Haroldsen. I'm with Intel. And I am, I guess, the Intel half of the Creators Project. We work with Vice. It's a global initiative to celebrate this amazing moment where art and technology comes together. And I won't dive too much into this, but we started a few years back with a pretty serious problem that young people didn't know how to relate or connect to Intel. We didn't have a product. They didn't really hate us. They didn't have bad feelings towards us. They just didn't know why they would care. And so we tried to do something very different to make Intel relevant in their lives.
And Shiv will talk a little bit about digital labs in a second.
Yep.
But David, talk about the scale of this. These are not small events. These are...
No, and we try to describe the Creators Project as, it's not just events. It's a platform where we communicate with young people in lots of different ways. So it's on our website. We have a website where our videos reviewed this year over 106 million times. We have a series of activities where we build stages for bands and they travel around and do that. We release albums. We help produce videos. We try to do a lot of things in addition to the events, all with the, go where the young people are and show what's possible when, their technology unleashes them to do what they want to do.
Yeah, that's great. So let's talk a little bit about Pepsi and what you're doing around digital labs. And Pepsi could talk about quite a bit, the Super Bowl, the crowdsourced introduction to Beyonce's show, the Doritos ads were great. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that you do on the traditional side that is great. But talk about digital labs.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, it's we established this whole structure around how we partner with startups. And it started, really through, we had a lot of conversations with startups. And as we had those conversations, we realized that they could provide immense value to us, and we in turn could provide immense value to them. And what we realized the more we delved into it was that our relationship with them was sort of more like a VC, but without actually, ironically, needing a checkbook. Because what the startups wanted from us more than anything else was advice and guidance on building their products, their businesses, their monetization strategies. And they appreciated the insights and the value that we would bring as marketers, for a brand that has 1 billion servings every day around the world. In turn, working with these startups was immeasurably and is immeasurably valuable to us. Because one is we get in at the ground floor, their culture and their ethos heavily influences us in a very positive way. Our relationships with them at the early stage, what it does is it lets the relationship carry through as they get bigger and fancier. Now, I work for a very large CPG. One would argue that, we have big budgets, we can do what we like. But when, in today's day and age, Facebook and Twitter, for example, are incredibly powerful in the media ecosystem. However, when them or even Foursquare, and I'll use Foursquare as an example, we partnered with them when they were just 30,000 users, really, really tiny, and did some cool initiatives with them that helped build their business, helped give us credibility with certain audiences, helped influence our own thinking about user behavior. Now that they're in the 20, 30, 40 million users, that relationship from those early days has carried through and makes for a much better business partnership that's not just transactional oriented. And that's just one small example. There are like dozens of startups who we've worked with, where we worked with them when they were very small, and it's blossomed into something really big. And the joke at Pepsi is that we see these founders come in with something really small. They go do amazing stuff. We're part of it in some way in the beginning. They make their zillions, and this is one way that they don't forget about us when they make their zillions. Yeah.
So is it just that they won't forget about you and you count on the goodwill, or is there more of a relationship there? Not a financial relationship, but any agreement that...
Yeah, no, I mean, it's so one is we don't work with any and every startup. So we have a whole vetting process. And there are a couple of different paths to how we integrate into the startup culture. So one is, 10% of our digital media spend on average goes towards working with startups, but we use that money in a way with them where we're making sure we're getting the clear business value out of it. The second thing is we co-locate in some of these incubator spaces, like at WeWork Labs, where we have our team members cycle in and spend a day a week working there with the startups, thinking, feeling like startups. So it also helps with employee retention. Third is we sponsor and host certain startup events. So it's really as a social thing where we're there with them, we're supporting them, they're supporting us. And then fourth, we do a whole series of tests with these startups and bring them into our bigger, broader media relationships.
Well, and I'd like to get back to you talk about business outcomes later on. We'll talk more about, specifically how do you guys hold that accountable. But another question for you, Shiv. David talked about how the Creators Project, in a way, was addressing a challenge for the Intel brand, making it relevant for younger consumers. What challenge or what problem does the Digital Lab solve for Pepsi?
Yeah. So I would say a few different problems it solves, which is very, very helpful. So the first is the whole notion of startup culture and digital culture is not separate from marketing anymore. It's all one and the same. And by doing what we do, we actually build our brands and build street credibility with our new consumers. So, that's the first. The second is we're able to design not just marketing programs, but actually, God forbid, and don't mind my arrogance here, but influence the shape of a startup. So as it monetizes and as it matures, its product and its advertising strategy is in sync with our value system and how we want to market. So as they get bigger, we're actually buying and advertising and partnering with them in ways that we know are guaranteed work for our business. Massively valuable. And then the third piece is, which is the least measurable but the most valuable, I think, is the cultural influence on us and us on them. So it's not like two dramatically different beasts, one in Animal Kingdom and one in Magic Kingdom. They're together. I was at Disney World this weekend, so that explains that.
So, and there's a bunch that you talked about there that we'll get back to. But, hey, David, Intel's a chip company. This is a huge arts and music initiative.
Sure.
There's a couple of steps in there.
Yeah.
Where'd the idea come from? And does it have support from the top?
Yeah, it was a pretty dramatic move for Intel. We're pretty old. We've been around for a long time, and we've established a pretty successful track with our partner marketing, with our OEM partners. And, and we got to a point several years ago where we knew young people weren't relating to us. And we had tried in the past to, align ourselves with cool events or activities, but it wasn't shifting the dynamics at all. And what we determined pretty quickly was that we needed something very different and unique, that we needed almost a guide to take us into this environment and admit that we weren't the leader in this area. And so the first big risk was partner with a company like Vice. I don't know if everybody's heard of Vice. They've been in the news recently this week with the Dennis Rodman stuff. They are, initially when we showed this slide where Intel and Vice partners with together for the Creators Project to our CEO, he was like, I don't know who Vice is, but that sounds weird, and I don't want to partner with them. But when we dove into it, the real story is that, we didn't know how to tell the story correctly. We didn't know how to relate to young people. We didn't have a connection with artists. When we went to go talk to artists, we ended up talking to agents, and it was just this money transaction and not like a loyalty kind of thing. And so in teaming with Vice, we quickly learned that there was an opportunity to do something really differently. And it's not just like we're sponsoring something. Together we came up with this idea. The founder of Vice, Shane Smith, has always had this dream of recreating Paris in the 20s, where all these artists gather together, and together they kind of teach each other, and it magnifies their art. We want to do the same thing on a much bigger global scale, where we brought together examples of amazing artists from all different fields, from music, film, design, from China, Brazil, Europe, US, South Korea, and mix them all together and see what happens. It was just a crazy, shouldn't work kind of concept for Intel, but that's, I think, what makes it so amazing is that none of it should have worked, but it's turned out to be one of the greatest things, I believe, that we've done.
So, I talked at the outset about how one thing that helps unconventional companies stand out is this notion of being patient, a little long-term, and supporting startups is certainly not a short-term thing either, Shiv.
Sure.
Was there a moment you talked about the CEO's first reaction was, this doesn't make any sense? When did the light bulb come on for him?
It takes a while. I mean, you pitch throughout your organization, you pitch things in different ways, right? For him, you pitch it as an experiment, an opportunity to test. For us, the amazing thing that worked for us was that we have a great CMO. She understands the power of youth. She understands, the beauty of music and film, and that you have to, talk to youth differently. And so we had a champion that would push us through. I mean, because none of it makes any sense. It's hard to track and measure, and I'm sure we'll get into all that kind of stuff. But it takes somebody just like, no, this is what we're doing for 3 years. We're going to test this thing and see how it works.
So Shiv, for you, was it tough making the case? I know Pepsi has some new leadership over the past couple of years. Were they into this right away? Was it a hard case to make?
So I'll share a secret. We didn't make the case. We actually just took the approach of starting to do it, not branding it, not asking for permission, not making it a big deal until we had a few successes under our belt. It's sort of one of the bizarre benefits of being in such a large organization, that so much can go below the radar, and I realized we might as well make it work for us. So we didn't pitch it in, we didn't sell it in. We actually had it running for 6-7 months before we started talking about it. And then the proof was in the pudding, Yeah.
Well, and so you started slowly, you started to build some proof, but then 10% of a digital spend is a lot of money. So I'm sure there's been moments you've had moments of truth where you present it to the CMO or the CEO and...
Yeah, and I think that's where, I think the piece that sometimes maybe gets forgotten with startup culture is that you have a lot of startups that they may be small, but they have immense reach. So it's actually relatively easy to demonstrate value out of it. So a good example is, with Kip, who we partnered with around Propel, a whole new advertising format. You do something in a mobile application, like you go for a run and you map your run using Map My Run. You've done the run, you've had a great run, you're tired. Guess what? You get a Propel mix as a reward, and it's how we do sampling for it. It just makes such amazing business sense, and that Map My Run application has enough reach for us to be able to see a demonstratable ROI on it. So, that's where the hard science comes in, is looking for the startups that are about to break, that can give you that reach, that are willing to be flexible and not think that they are going to be Steve Jobs the very next morning, and then work in a way so that it makes sense for our business. Yeah. And it's not one startup. When you spread 10% over, dozens and dozens of startups,
right,
it's easy to quantify.
And
there's some failures too.
Yeah, sure. It's a portfolio. So you're not necessarily trying to, these consumers are not buying your chips, but they influence your success in the market. So how how do you guys measure that? So consumers go into your concerts or experiences with one set of perceptions, they come out with a different. Maybe it's not that simple, but how do you measure that?
Yeah, so it's if I had my way, they would just trust me. My gut says this is going to be awesome, and we're going to go. But I've learned pretty quickly that does not work at Intel. We measure everything, and it really is, data and research is the language that gets us more budget, more respect, and so we need to be able to translate what we're doing through research to prove its value. And so we do a lot of measurement. Obviously all the traffic kind of stuff.
Yep.
I mentioned that, the volume of video views, and about 90,000 people went to our events last year. Those are a lot of nice touches. And, we tried to brand differently to young people. You may notice there was some branding. We put them in the nice picture so you can kind of see the Intel and Vice logos. But we really tried to dial back our branding, and so that was the debate with our research team. Will they still understand us, or know that we're the ones that brought the Creators Project to life? So we would do focus groups after every event that we do and bring kids in. First year, every one of them could remember Intel as the company, Intel and Vice, that brought it to life. They didn't really know why Intel was there, but they were happy for it. And as we continued that process, our relationship grew with them. They liked us more. They understood why we were there. And so focus groups, and then also we do a lot of pre and post in country before the year starts. And we're checking brand lift. Do they like Intel more? Are they willing to buy Intel? Even though that's not really our goal is to sell anything, we want them to start thinking about Intel and potential relationship they want to have with us.
Right. And do you have that from focus groups where a consumer now might use different words to, a young consumer to describe the Intel brand than you saw 3 years ago when you launched?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's kind of funny because the first year, we always ask them the question of, if you could describe Intel as a person, who would that person be? And so the first year, kind of expected this old dude in a lab coat, kind of hovering in the corner, watching the young kids. That's what they expected when they came. They kind of came to the event kind of leery. They liked Vice. They thought it'd be cool, free beer or whatever, and then Intel would be kind of hovering over. And we weren't there. I mean, we participated in a very authentic way, we believe. And so there was that moment the first year. The next year, same city, the relationship had changed. They talked about Intel in a totally different way. They viewed us as kind of this cool 50-year-old with salt and pepper hair, with cool jeans and maybe some Converse, and just like grooving to the music. And they viewed Creators Project now as like this brand they would trust. It's kind of like a premium brand Intel has, and that if they put their stamp on something, they would go to it or buy something or want to learn more about it. And so that has evolved over time.
Yeah, no, that's great. And so Shiv, you've talked a little bit about some of the results or impact of these investments, but how do you hold it accountable? I know that you've got an analytics culture too.
So this is like an exact example of where we can add a lot of value to those companies in a very dramatic way, because they don't know when you're a startup, you're focused on your product. It's product, and then users. The idea of monetization, the idea of measurement is like many moons away.
Yeah.
But you actually need that sooner than you realize. So we help a lot there. But to give you an example, and this isn't really with a startup, but it matters as much. So last year, we were Twitter's largest partner, their largest advertiser, the largest brand partner, and we had a massive 365-day program with them. And the program had 3 parts. Every week, we would gather Twitter insights. Out of that, there'd be this 1-minute bite-sized music video recap created. Then there'd be music downloads associated with it. And then at 4 points in the course of the year, we live streamed these like Twitter-powered concerts, one with Nicki Minaj, one with Katy Perry, Gloriana, and a Michael Jackson themed one. All really interesting, all really valuable. But to measure the effectiveness, we needed measures that Twitter didn't have. So we worked with them and with Nielsen to basically create what is now the Twitter standard measurement format, coming through Nielsen around how do you measure brand lift, how do you measure all those equity things, how do you measure recall, all within the Twitter platform. So it was created with them for this initiative. And then on top of that, how do you measure offline sales impact working with data logic? So it's a combination of new measures, old measures, bringing in the right partners, and then quite simply seeing the results. And an example of a new measure is, we know historically that the more brand Pepsi is ingrained in music culture, the more it drives our product. There's like 30 years of research around that. But in a social media-driven world, measuring that and knowing what that means is very hard. So we were measuring percentage of conversations on Twitter that are around music, of which Pepsi is a part of, and then seeing that impact on offline sales. So it's really fascinating the new forms of measurement one can do with different partners, and we've invested a lot in that.
Yeah.
And we got great results with Twitter.
You had mentioned Shiv Bluefin Labs, I believe,
Yeah.
as an example of a partnership that was really fruitful to both sides. Can you talk a little bit about that? What did you use them for? What happened? How did that unfold?
This was 2 years ago, and we're like, we're about to go into South by Southwest in a few weeks' time, and we want a way to track which artists are talked about the most at South by Southwest, which music artists, because that could be really valuable for us, and we want to do stuff with them. So we quickly concepted and created this little piece of technology with them that was basically a music chart 2 years ago, all based on conversation. And they have like some really powerful, deep algorithms. That initiative and one or two other things that they were doing led to them getting into the whole social TV space before it really opened up. So we were then, when they entered the social TV space and said, look, that kind of thinking and that kind of technology that we worked with you on and that they had originally created at MIT, I don't want to imply that we had anything to do with actual technology. We're going to use this to track TV shows and the social media response. Is it something that marketers care about? And when, and this was Deb, when he asked me that, I nearly fell off my chair. I was like, the biggest problem with TV is that when the damn box is on, we don't know whether someone's in the room or in the kitchen or elsewhere. And if we can measure the social response level, that's hugely valuable. It'll influence how much we spend against a different program, a show, a channel, a network, what may be. So they went and built their stuff. Every time they'd launch something, like a month earlier, they'd show it to us, get our feedback. We'd help drive it, say, this is what we need. And it just kept building and building. We were their first brand partner. We introduced them to other marketers as well. Fast forward 2.5 years later, Deb spoke at TED. He's all over the place. And they got acquired by Twitter. And now it's a Twitter, Nielsen, Bluefin partnership that's creating this new measurement for social TV response.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah, and along that way, we've been looking at those metrics. It's been informing and guiding how we spend with them. And during that period, especially in the early days, we had a handshake agreement, which was like, hey, we're going to give you a lot of love. You give us a lot of love. Don't make a lot of flights down to Atlanta. And he was like, sure.
Yeah.
There are enough other companies in the world.
David, I wanted to see if you had a story about when did this, for you, when did it come to life that, hey, this is really making a difference? Was it a reaction in a focus group? Was it somebody at a concert? Was it a connection between an Intel engineer and an artist?
Yeah, when we started this thing, the dream was, to make this more than just some marketing activity where we're getting our brand out there. We really wanted this to be a thing where we helped artists and artists helped us. And so there's this cool, in the video we had one of the Intel engineers, Doug. He's been at Intel for 25 years, worked on most of the processors that had come out during that time. Really smart dude, way smarter than me. And he now heads up a team in charge of trying to create the next kind of computing experience. So this wouldn't be in front of a computer. It would be, every surface is a computer kind of thing. And he was going to go walk the streets of Portland looking for artists to try to inspire him to do something. And because Intel's huge as well, and we don't know what anybody's doing. And so we bumped into him, he bumped into us, and it was like this magic spark of like, maybe we can help each other. We introduced him to a few artists, and it's cool, just within the first day of him hanging out with us at this event, he met this wonderful Brazilian art couple that kind of earthy and hippie, and they talked to him, and they said, you should design the next computer like the forest. And, an Intel engineer guy, he's like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Sounds pretty. And they said, when you sit down in front of your computer, your body doesn't know how to interact with it. You kind of figure it out, you mess with it, do some stuff, but it's not this natural thing. But when you walk in the forest, your body just feels like you're part of it. It's with you. And you should create some computer that just engages with your body. It's, it should be one with you. And it's totally changed the way that they think about computing in the future and how they're building this, every surface kind of environment, which is really awesome. And so you've got that, and then you've got Doug and his big brains going and helping all of our artists do cool stuff, because our artists look at our engineers as their heroes because they just want to do cool stuff. And so it's this amazing thing where people are helping each other, and for a second you step back out of your marketing world and you're like, man, I'm changing the world today.
Yeah. Shiv, when was the Digital Labs? When did you start that?
Officially or unofficially?
Unofficially sounds like the real start.
Yeah, I'd say it was 3 years ago, just under 3 years ago. And, officially, it was a year back.
Right. So 3 years, it sounds like it's been germinating. And Creators Project is about 3 years old?
We're entering our 4th year now.
So what have you guys learned? I mean, I'm sure you went into this with a lot of assumptions, and you've been testing and learning along the way. You've made mistakes.
Well, I mean, I'd say firstly, there's no shortage of the amount you can learn from startup culture and digital culture more broadly. So I'd say that's the first thing. The second thing is, going in, we didn't realize all the supplementary benefits that we'd get. The benefit of, it helps our reputation, it helps us attract talent, it helps us connect the dots of, user behavior trends that are coming in. I think we learned that, there'll be hit or miss situations too. I mean, my favorite example was we were working with a startup, and they said, you have to pay us tomorrow. And I said, why tomorrow? And they said, well, we have a cash flow problem. And I'm like, we don't pay for 60 days after the work's delivered. I'm going to have to really pull some strings to make this happen, and I'm going to hurt my own credibility, and we'll just have to you have to take those hits. So it's funky. It's when it's like talking different languages. And then I think what we also learned is that shiny objects are good, but you can't have too many shiny objects, because then it blinds you, and you lose focus on what your core objective is. So what we try and do is, what we do with startups fits into our different brand calendars and our different brand campaigns. And that's really critical. And then now, as we evolve this, we're thinking about how do we standardize measurement a lot more strictly across the board as well.
Yeah.
I mean, I could go on and on.
Well, is there any, that you talked a little bit about what's going to happen next. Any other ideas that you have for how Digital Labs might evolve? Certain areas of technology that you're going to focus on? You talked about common measurement platforms.
Yeah, I mean, I think, one area so two things we're definitely looking at doing is having a lot more strategic relationships with the VCs, whether they're in Silicon Alley or Silicon Valley, because having a filter is really important, and the right filter. Otherwise, there's just too much out there, and it's hit and miss. The other thing we're thinking about is how can we use these relationships through Digital Labs as a way to affect higher order business decisions, whether that's when we do joint programs with our big customers like the Walmarts of the world, or when we think about a new product offering, how can it be digitized in a certain way, and that can be influenced by a startup or something. So there are a lot of different directions.
No, that's good.
I'd have to shoot you too.
If you tell us any
and
more.
Everyone else would say that. Just tell more.
Yeah. So, David, what about you? What have you guys learned? How have you course corrected?
Yeah. So, I think our biggest learning is that Intel has an authentic story. We just weren't doing it right or telling it right. And so, and the power of authenticity is so strong, especially with youth, right? They have this factor, if you're faking it in any way or you're just going through the motions, they'll tune you right out. And so for us, the big learning was, the first year, like I described, we partnered with Vice. They were going to be our guides in. And we were getting frustrated because we weren't getting the credibility. We looked like the bank behind this thing versus like an authentic player. And we started kind of going through all the activities, and we learned that we were just standing in the background, just happy to be part of the discussion. And really, we should embrace this authentic program. We believe that Intel is the only one that could do something like this because we don't care what computer you use. Intel is on all of them, and so it gives us a unique position to like allow artists to do what they do without, any kind of restraint. And so we started to take a more active stand and be really proud about our position, about our company, about the benefit we bring to artists worldwide. And that totally changed the dynamics of this whole program, and again reinforced that if you have an authentic story, be really proud about it, magnify it, drive in there, because if it's fake or you're going through the motions or you're trying to copy somebody else just to be cool, it's not going to pay off in the long run. You're not going to have loyal, advocates for you. And so that's the biggest thing for us.
Yeah.
And I think the one other thing is that, at the end of the day, we're dealing and working with humans at like a good level. I mean, that's where the magic happens. I think there's a lot of times where you try to force issues because things feel right or they should work, all the ingredients are there, and you're in a boardroom and you're ready to like get creative, and it just doesn't take. And I think we've learned pretty quickly that if it doesn't take within a first week or two, stop forcing the issue. There's plenty of other opportunities and amazing people and really great ideas out there. Can't waste time anymore.
Yeah.
Deal with people that you relate with or bail.
Move on. Yeah.
Yep.
And what about a look forward? What's new from the Creators Project down the road?
Yeah, we're really excited about the year. Again, I can't reveal too much. We'll have a pretty big announcement in the next few weeks, I think, talking about what we're doing. But, it's shocking news here. It's a big, big world out there. And we're looking for opportunities to tell our story as broad as we can and big. And so we're going to leverage a lot of the vehicles that allow us to tell our story to the most amount of people. And so, we're going to continue to invest in great artists, tell amazing stories. The beauty of our program is, through continual repetition of building these relationships, we're able to do bigger and more amazing things with people. And it takes time sometimes, and we've invested the time. And so I think this year you're going to see some of the payoff in that.
Yeah.